Hi, everybody. This is Nirja Singh, the Teenager, with my episode Teenager Seats. And today we are going to be talking about age diversity and inclusion. Now, everybody in the professional world knows what an explosion there is in diversity today. And age is an important component because of the silver tsunami all around us, the silvering of the world. There are new demographics that we deal with. Now, what are the Indian companies? What is the Indian professional corporate world? Uh, how do how is that viewing it, and how is that leveraging this? Let's talk to a very highly accomplished young professional I have with me today, and this is Vinay. Vinay is currently the global head HR admin and travel. The company's name is Terapay. He works there full time. Vinay is TA Pi Young HR leader. That is in Economic Times. It's a kind of a title that he's got from Economic Times. He's a speaker and he's the guest faculty university advisory board. Vinay, you're going to tell us a little more about your position there and about the university. Also, he's trying to be human. He says trying being human because of the uncertain times. And Vinay believes that unconventional approaches are required today. And his motto is right now to bring the human element back in HR. Vinay, let's start. First, quickly tell us a little about your university connection and a little more about the Economic Times. I may not have reported that accurately. Thank you.
Thank you for having me over today. So I'm associated with university since 2013. I spend a lot of time with academia. I am on advisory boards of various universities and business schools. Typically, they get industry folks to come and talk about what's relevant and how they can make their programs better. In addition to delivering lectures, taking courses, taking sessions, and multiple initiatives in through the academia. So it's more of an industry academia bridge that I work on maintaining. So that's how I'm associated with so many universities and B schools in the country.
All right. Now, Vinay, what particular university? You said many universities, so it's not just one university, is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm associated with Chitara University in Chandigarh. I'm associated with Children University in Meerut. I'm associated with Purnima University in Jaipur. I am associated with Masters Union Business School, which is a new Gen B school that's just coming into its existence. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm associated with Pune Institute of Business Management, PIBM, another B school that's been running for 12 years now. Uh,
Okay.
Typically, I choose universities that are not very well known, um, and sort of help them
Mhm.
because everybody wants to associate it with branded universities. But I take the other path where I go to universities that are in their initial stages of existence and work with them to see how we can get them into the mainstream.
Wonderful, lovely. You really have a very impressive profile. You're doing a lot of work, and all my admiration for you, Vinay. And let's start talking about age diversity. Now, what has your experience been in your company? It's, I think, over 14 years or more than that you've been working with
Yeah.
age diversity. And how many generations are you currently working with?
So, in today's fast moving era, right? While you have millennials and you have Gen Z and you have Gen X and you have baby boomers and you have obviously pre-baby boomers generation. So there are a lot of people at the workforce.
Yes.
My view is that even within these groups, there are generational gaps. Today, a generation gap is defined by just 5, 6 years of age difference, not even more. Okay. Uh, Earlier, we would bucket these groups into 20 years, but I think now with the fast moving world that we are in, it's just 5, 6 years, and
Okay.
that's how narrow the generation gap is. And yeah, there are. I was just sort of rattling in, the statistics. I work with five different generations at my workplace.
Five,
Despite
right? Five.
five,
Wow. Yeah,
five,
that's
and this
interesting.
I've bucketed in 10 in a group of 10 10 years.
Huh.
Essentially, it'll mean 10 different generations by definition of 5 years.
I feel validated when you say that, because a lot of people say, "What's the big deal? Generation gap has always been there," but the change is so stark, and
Yeah.
there's such a difference in their basic values. So, which generation do you feel the biggest challenge with?
I don't see that there is any challenge. Yeah, the fact that when people look at generational gap as challenges, that itself is a problem and a red flag for me. I
Okay.
think you look at your own household, and I keep talking about this. Whenever somebody says, "Oh, but he's very old, or he's too young. Will he have the maturity, or will he be over matured?" I mean, these are typical conversations that you would hear in
Yes.
in, uh, in,
Yes.
in hiring decisions that you make, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
My simple question to them is, how many people are there in your house, and how many generations do you live with, right? Do you put them out of the house because they're old and you're young, or do you coexist with them peacefully? Of course, there's no counter to that. Um, and that drives the point saying that they'll have to be mindful and respectful, and they should hire for capability, hire for intent, and not hire because somebody's old or somebody's young.
Okay.
It's a difficult conversation to have, but yeah, that's the direction in which I typically move.
But Vinay, is there a difference in what it is like in India versus the West? Let's say that there's a greater acceptance of diversity. We are such a diverse country, and age groups. There's a different. There's a kind of a. You treat the older generation with a little. You treat them a little differently. Do you think it's an issue in Indian companies? Is there a difference in Indian companies versus the? Let's say now the companies are global, but even so, any difference there?
You know, I would say that uh, Indians in general are
Ha.
far more equipped to deal with multi-generational workforce by virtue of a family setup that we come from, right?
Very
We
interesting.
used to so many grandfather, great grandfather, parents, your generation, kids. So we are actually used to a multi-generational setup by default, and
Okay.
our approach to a multi-generational setup also is very different. I mean, when there's a grandfather in the house,
Hmm.
everything changes, and when you're alone, things change, etc., etc. So
Yeah.
actually, this for the Western world is like a lot of learning to deal with a multi-generational workforce versus us. We are used to it, you know.
Okay.
Um, yeah, while we would love to templatize the Western world, but I would rather say that we are much more equipped.
Okay. But with companies having gone global and the workforce being global, do you find ageism and diversity? Are there discussions? Is there discussion around it when you're recruiting in pretension and approaching or handling the younger generation a little differently, being more aware of their belief systems and their compulsions and their expectation? Expectation management becomes a big thing. So, is there a conversation happening in companies around it?
So what happens is when we are looking at, and I'm currently as I speak, I'm hiring in Europe. Um, I'm hiring in Southeast Asia.
Mhm.
That's Malaysia and Korea and all of that. Right. Now, the workforce that I get in Europe would be far more experienced than the workforce that I will get in Southeast Asia, for a
Okay.
simple reason that that's a dynamics of the average age of the country uh,
Hmm.
that you would hire in, and you would fully appreciate uh, that if you research well when you go into hiring in these countries, right?
I see.
But if it is Germany, you are going to possibly find many people in their 40s and 50s who are applying for jobs, versus if you are looking at Manila, where you will get 20 somethings or early 30s in your workforce, because that's the average age of the country.
Hmm.
So that's the data point I look through. So
Okay.
when you put that in perspective, that you don't have to explain it to people, because that's you've given that picture saying why and what. So then automatically the acceptance is by that expectation setting.
Now, there's a feeling, Vinay, that these are creations of the media, that it's a media created myth, the generation gap. But
Hmm.
what has it been like for you professionally? You have experienced it. Can you share a typical experience you've had with generation gap?
Generation gap is not a media creation, really. The gap exists, right? And the gap exists in individual experiences. Like, what is
Yes.
generation gap? The typical reference point in a generation gap is, during my time, this is what I used to do. You have to therefore do the same thing in your time, right?
Mm,
But today, with the advent of technology, right? Um, Possibly people who are 60 plus are much more active on Facebook, and adopting to technology. And I'm super proud when I look at my parents, who are super excited to post images and photos on social media, and write nice little wordings, etc., etc., and all of that.
mm,
So I think the advent of technology has made it easier to coexist with generations, and not difficult today, because you have a lot of platforms to express what you want to express. You can sometimes let off your steam on different platforms. Like, for example, you're pissed with something. You know that if your parent is on Facebook, you will go on Instagram and you will vent that out. Earlier, you never had those opportunities. It was only face to face.
yeah.
And therefore, you would bottle it up till you meet your friend, or you'll bottle it up till you have that phone call conversation, so on and so forth. Now it's instant. You're pissed off, you pick your phone up and just write a status update, and the whole world knows that you're upset with something, right? So
Mm,
I think uh, the generation gap existence is real, but
mhm.
dealing with that gap is far more easier today than it was in the 1980s or 1990s, when you did not have too many technology um, apparatus or tools or mediums available to express and share. Am I making sense to you? I mean, the
No,
90s.
I'm hearing you, but I also know, Vinay, the reality. I also know that with certain young people today, they claim that they're not able to communicate with their parents. There's certain subjects that they're not able to discuss, they're not able to talk about. On the other hand, there are enough and more children who feel completely at home with their parents. And you're right,
Yeah,
they do use technology to get their point across.
yeah,
So, but
yeah.
what particular topic at work, what particular area at work presents the biggest challenge amongst the generations in your view?
So there are these lot of times when you have so my demographics is 21 to 30 years are about 35%, 31 to 40 are about 38%,
Ah,
41 to 50 are about 15, 18%, right? And so we have like a fairly well diverse group, and it's not skewed towards just a particular thing. Now, a leader who is in the 41 to 50 and is heading a department, dealing with youngsters, right, will suddenly pick up the phone and tell me that, oh, you know what, these millennial thing, I don't understand what they're saying, why they're saying. So then I will sort of tell him to take a deep breath and calm down. And then I ask them the question again, saying, so what do you think is the actual problem, right?
hmm, hmm,
Um, and then when they state the actual problem, etc., etc., I ask them, what do you think you could do differently to be a little patient in this, right? More often than not, these two questions will get answers by themselves, where I don't have to have specific saying, you do this. The minute you say, when the minute somebody says, do this, oh,
hmm,
somebody is telling me to do this. Why should I
hmm.
do it? But if it comes from within, it's easier to adopt. So when I ask these two questions, they'll say, oh, yeah, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think I will be a little patient with this person, so on and so forth. Similarly, on the other side, when these millennials, I mean, I'm just using the term for a
These
reference,
millennials.
right? I'm a millennial myself, so I
Millennial.
really say but when they say that, oh, for lack of a better word, this uncle doesn't understand anything at office. He's in his own tangent, and he wants it this way and that way. So then you ask them, saying that, if there is a better way to do something, can you showcase that better way and say that, can I experiment? Will it work with him? they'll
Yeah.
say, yeah, if I tell him experiment, it'll work with him. But if I tell him I want this and this is doesn't make sense, it doesn't work. I said, okay, then you experiment. Show him, you do his way, do your way, show a result. He will appreciate it. You do it two times. Third time, when you tell I want to do it this way, he will not have a problem with it. But
Yeah.
you have to make that effort because you have to help him appreciate your point of view. And that
Mm.
is only till the time you help him appreciate the point of view. You will have to do it two times, three times. After that, you will not even have to ask. Now, this is exactly how you deal with generations, right? First time, second time, resistance. But when they understand and appreciate, then there's no problem. The
Yeah.
impatience happens only in that first and second time. But once you pass that stage, they know how to deal. And then they say, oh, I know how to deal with this person. First, I will show him this, then I'll show him this, it will work. And 99% of the time, it works. So these are the conversations I have with two diverse set of people when they come at loggerheads to me, um,
Yeah.
saying that they have a problem and what do we do with it.
Okay, Vinay, thank you very much. One final question, one last question. Amongst the gender, women and men, do you think women have a greater challenge with generation gap today? Because they are the ones who are, in the last 15, 20 years, let's say, there's been a transformational, there's been women empowerment, there's been the sexual revolution, there's been the breaking through the glass ceiling. Not as much as anybody would like it, but still so. Yeah, is there a difference, gender difference in?
Well, we are talking of patriarchal societies, right? If you're talking of whether there is a generational difference,
Yes.
do somebody have, they take time? I mean, of course there is, of
Mm,
course there is, right? But is it changing rapidly? Yes, it is changing rapidly, right?
mhm.
By and while we talk of work, right, and somehow and I believe that you are a representation of what you are at home at workplace because that is your value system. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of times people say professionally it has to be different, personally it has to
Mm,
be different.
mhm,
I believe that your inherent thought process is coming because of what you've been taught in your house
mm.
subconsciously. There's a conscious subconscious bias that you call. Subconsciously, you are reacting to what you have seen in your house, right? I have seen where there are daughters in the house. Those managers are far more appreciative of women workforce versus when there are sons. Now,
Yes.
it may be a bold statement that I'm making, or I may be generalizing, but the
Mm,
fact is the appreciation that you have towards things
mm.
automatically change when you raise a woman in the house, right?
Right.
Yes, there are challenges. I definitely think that we live in a man's world, and it's unfortunate that women have to prove and break glass ceiling, and it's not normal for us to be accepting and all of that. But I think the rate of change, the pace of change is very very rapid. If you ask me, in the next decade or so, the kind of changes that will happen, we will not even be discussing this,
Yes.
which we've been discussing for 40 years, 50 years. But I
So
see
true.
that we are coming towards that where we are, pretty comfortable.
So true. And also, in conclusion, I will say that my generation, the boomers, are also many of us not wanting to retire anymore, which is very different from the earlier generations. Many of us want to continue to stay relevant. Many of us wanting to reinvent ourselves, and many of us with better health, better cardiovascular health,
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
resilient because we've not had our hearts broken, we've not consumed too much,
Correct.
and in terms of health, perhaps we feel that we have some more decades to go, and that's a big change. That's another big change that we see around
No,
us.
I think the average age that people are going to work is going to be 75 till about 75. The way
Absolutely.
I see it, right?
Yes.
And a lot of corporates are opening up to this because they also realize that there is value to experience.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, I mean it's not no longer 58 and 60 is retirement. I think it is 75, and it's only very soon that officially we will move to 64, 65 as retirement age, etc., etc. As we again, this is like a statistical linkage to the average age of the country,
Yes.
but you will certainly see that move up to 65 in the next couple of years officially.
Yes. So, on that cheerful and hopeful note, thank you very much, Vinay, for joining me today on Senior Seats on age and diversity. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me over, and I had a lovely time sharing some candid thoughts.
Thank you.